Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today we will be replacing a front wheel bearing on a 97 Jeep Grand Cherokee. And for today's project we will be needing a couple of pry bars, possibly a hammer, pliers, torque wrench, a 12 millimeter or a 12-point half-inch socket. We got some breaker bars, ratchet, 36 millimeter 6-point, and an impact gun. Alright, now let's get started. Alright, so as you can see, we've already got the wheel off. We've got it lifted up, properly secured. First, we're going to start by loosening up this brake caliper. That way we have a little bit of extra room to wiggle around with. And we're going to take our pry bars. We're actually going to put them back to back to try and just get a little bit of room so that caliper comes off easier. Alright, so we've got our pry bars. We're back to back. And just a little bit of effort. Nope, that didn't give us enough room. Let's try it again. Alright, so you can see we've got some space between our pads and our rotor, so when we go to take it off, it's going to slide off a whole lot easier. Brake caliper bolts, I forgot to mention we're also going to need a 12 millimeter, and we're just going to put that. Alright, and now that we've got those bolts loose, out, remove them, and we're going to take our caliper, and we're actually going to support it. I like to use zip ties. I'm going to zip tie it to that spring right there. That way we don't put any unneeded stress on this brake hose here. Alright, now that we've got our caliper supported, we're going to remove our brake rotor. Sometimes you may need to use some more persuasive methods. That's where the hammer comes in. Just make sure you use the flat face of the hammer and do even hits. You shouldn't damage your rotor too bad, hopefully. Alright, and now we're going to take the pliers and remove this cotter pin here. That should slide out. Maybe a little bit of wiggling. Alright, we got our cotter pin out. We take that off, and then we got the nut. Alright, so now we have our spindle nut, and that's where the 36 millimeter comes in play. I'm going to use my impact here, and we're going to get it off. Might need to hold it. Okay, so now that we've got the nut off, we've got the axle free, we're going to come back here, and this is where your half-inch 12-point comes in. You got the 3 bolts. You got 1, 2, and then third one. These may need some extra persuasion, so you may need like a cheater bar to go on your breaker bar to get some more leverage on it. Also, PB Blaster helps, and we're gonna get these loose now. Okay, so I've got my socket breaker bar on there, and it is not gonna come out. So I've got a big pipe here, and we're gonna give it some extra leverage. And there we go. Okay, now that we've got our bolts loose, we're going to take our ratchet and our socket, and we're going to get them out now. We're going to do this for all 3 of them. And then we're going to persuade that bearing to come out of the hub there. I'll be back. All right, now that we've got our 3 bolts out, we're going to take our hammer and hit it right on the edge of this hub around. And it should just come right out. You may have to use more or less force depending on how stuck it is. You see, it's starting to separate now with the little force that I'm using. Also, if you go back and forth, it helps. And there you go. Alright, and now that we've got our old bearing out, we've also got the dust shield off, so we're going to take the dust shield and put it back up there. Then we're going to take the bearing and line it up. Okay, now that we've got our bearing and our dust shield lined up, I've got a couple bolts started them by hand. That way you know that they're not cross-threaded and you know that everything is lined up how it should be. Then we're just going to run them down, tighten them down. Now I always like to go a little bit and then jump over to one of the other ones. That way you know it's also going in evenly. So we got that one. We're going to jump over to this back one. Now we've got that one ran in some. We're going to jump to this top one here. And you can see how the bearing is crooked now. But that's going to pull it straight. Okay, now that we have all 3 of the bolts ran in, we've got the bearing back straight. We're going to take our torque wrench, and being that torque spec for these bolts are 75 foot-pounds, and being that I have an adapter in there, I went ahead and cranked it up a couple pounds, went to about 80. We're going to make sure we have it tight enough now. That one's good. And we're going to go and do the other 2 the same way. Now, as you can see here, I don't have very much room with the torque wrench, adapter, and socket on that bolt. Actually, on the other side, I couldn't even get it in without a lot of maneuvering. Same thing with this side. It is possible, though. And it's just a matter of safety, keeping you know that you got it tight enough or not over tight. Okay, now that we've got our 3 bolts tightened down, tightened to torque, we got everything on there. We're going to go ahead and throw the rotor and the caliper back on. And then being that I use a zip tie on that, we're just going to cut that. Alright, and being that we pushed the caliper back a little bit earlier when we took it off, should just slide right on there. We're then going to replace our 2 slide pin bolts. Tighten them down. Of course, finger start. And then we're going to take our ratchet and socket and run them in tight. Okay, now that we have those 2 bolts in there and good and tight, we're going to bring our attention back over here to the spindle nut. We've got our washer. We've got our nut. Okay, now that we have everything on, it's time to tighten down that spindle nut. Torque spec on the spindle nut is 175. Easiest way to do this is to either pump up the brakes and then find some way to brace the brake pedal to where you don't have it turning on you, because without, you're not going to get very far. Or you could just have somebody in there holding the brake pedal down. Okay, now that you have the spindle nut torqued, now we're going to come back and we're going to take our washer, which keeps pressure on this retainer. We'll line up the retainer where you're going to line up the retainer with the hole on top of the axle. That way you can come back and you can put your cotter pin back in. Okay, now that you have your cotter pin back in, we're going to take our pliers. We're going to pull it the rest of the way. We're going to take this leg, wrap it around, and then we're going to take this leg and wrap it the other way like it was, and that way there's nothing that's going to make that spindle nut back out. Okay, now that we have our cotter pin back in, we've got everything tight, ready to go. Time to put the wheels on and get them tight, and you're all set. All right, thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe to the channel, and have a nice day.